Hi, I'm Andrew Shovlin, I'm Trackside Engineering Director, and I'm here to answer your questions from the Singapore Grand Prix. Lack of pace in qualifying, well that's quite a difficult one because the balance was pretty good. Now we were clearly struggling to get the cars in the right place on track to allow them to do the outlap that they wanted. Both Lewis and Valtteri were wanting to go quicker than a lot of the other cars, and it's a difficult circuit. If you're on an outlap and you're stuck behind someone who wants to go slow, you can't really get by. If you look though at the balance of the car, well the balance of the car wasn't in a bad region. But you saw with Valtteri, he was in traffic on those crucial laps and it really cost him a lot of time. And even Lewis wasn't able to go as fast as he wanted. So we don't think it's really a case of the setup. It is all about those tyres and getting them to work. And Singapore is one of the trickiest tracks for that. The reason we didn't go for the undercut was twofold. One, there were a number of cars from the midfield that were still out and they would have become traffic for Lewis on fresh tyres. So he would have had a few laps in clear air, 2, maybe 3 at most, but then he would have hit that traffic and we weren't sure we would be able to get through. So it wasn't like he had a clear track to run onto. But the other question was all about Leclerc and his tyres. He'd been driving very, very slowly and we thought that he'd still have a lot of life in those tyres. Now as it happened, they fell apart very quickly, almost as soon as he started pushing. And if we'd known that, that would have obviously biased us to go for the early stop. So as I said in the last question, we didn't go for the undercut because of that risk of traffic. But once you don't take that, on lap 19, Vettel had taken it, the windows then closed for Lewis, he would have fallen behind Vettel, so we're into going long. The reason we're going long is twofold. One is that there's a good chance of a safety car in Singapore, and if there had been one, we would have benefited from that with a much shorter stop. And the other one is we weren't sure how easy it would be to take the hard tyre those 40 plus laps to the end of the race. We were thinking if we could offset with Lewis, get him on good tyres at the end of the race, there would also be opportunity to overtake. Now, with hindsight, it was clearly the wrong decision, but those are the reasons that we decided once you haven't gone short, you may as well go as long as you can, and we ended up running the soft tyres down to 0, trying to stretch that as far as we could. Regarding the choice of tyres at Lewis's stop, well, we went for the hard, as you saw almost everyone did. Now, the hard tyre is actually 2 positions harder than the medium tyre. There used to be a tyre called the Super Soft that would sit between them. So it's quite a different rubber. It's got less grip, but it's much more resilient. And when you're trying to do the sort of stint lengths we were looking at in Singapore, really you've got to go for that hard tyre to do the 40 plus laps. And that's why you saw almost everyone from that stage of the race taking the hard tyre. Coming up to those first stops, we saw Vettel and Verstappen stop on 19. But for our race, or for Valtteri's race, Albon stopping on 20 was quite crucial because he was going to move into a position where he could undercut Valtteri. Now normally, we would give the lead car the choice of stop lap, and that would have been Lewis in this instance. Because we gave it to Valtteri, it meant Valtteri moved into a position where he would undercut Lewis. The team was obviously wanting to go as far as we could with Lewis to either benefit from a safety car or to have the best tyres at the end of the race. And that was why we asked Valtteri to effectively neutralise the situation, to slow down, to allow us to go as long as we could with Lewis and retaining the positions as they were before the stop. We were fairly certain that the race without safety cars was going to end up being a one-stop that would require some management. But we've always prepared a plan for a 2-stop, because you never know, if the tyres start to drop off, that might be possible, and whoever's in 5th place or 6th place can probably take that stop without really losing any position, or certainly only losing 1 position. So it is something that we planned for, but as it happened, the race was more or less what we expected. It was just those safety cars at the end that kept bunching the field up that meant it was impossible to convert to a 2-stop. The truth is, we analyse every race. It's just that after this one, there's a few questions that we need answers to ahead of Sochi. Now we're here in the UK just for 1 day, we've got a number of meetings, but we're focusing on qualifying performance. That's clearly one area that we weren't strong enough, understanding how to get the tyres in the right window. And that's going to use people who are from the tyre group, people from the performance group, we'll use the race engineers in there, and we're just looking at how we can get all the performance out of the package for Sochi in a few days' time. We're also looking at the strategy side as well, reviewing the decisions we made, what we knew, and crucially making sure that we can get better data into it for Sochi so we know exactly what the tyres are capable of and we're not afraid of taking them too far. So those are the areas that we're going to be focused on today, but genuinely a bad race and a good race are not that different. It's just that with a bad race there's generally more to learn, actually more areas that you can look for improvements to be better in the future. Thank you very much for your questions. We will be back next week after the Russian Grand Prix to answer some more.